Right. Well, my name is Howard Straus, and I'm the grandson of Dr. Max Gerson, the very famous German physician Albert Schweitzer called the most eminent medical genius ever to walk among us. And my mother is Charlotte Gerson, his daughter, Dr. Gerson's daughter. And Dr. Gerson developed a therapy for degenerative diseases, not just a degenerative disease, but all degenerative diseases. Back in the early 1900s, when he was a physician in Bielefeld, Germany,
Mm.
and he discovered when he used the diet that he was almost forced to use to escape his debilitating migraine headaches, he discovered that it also cleared up skin tuberculosis. And so he started to explore that and treat skin tuberculosis. And when he was doing that, he discovered that it cleared up whatever else was wrong, like diabetes and arthritis and high blood pressure and things like that. And he had to completely reorient himself as far as medical paradigm, because the medical paradigm of the time was one disease, one treatment. And here he had one treatment that was addressing and clearing multiple diseases. So he had to completely revamp his thinking about human health and how it worked. And so eventually, what he discovered was that he was treating not a symptom or a set of symptoms, but he was treating the underlying healing system of the body using nutrition. And this set him, excuse me, this set him, of course, on at odds with all of his colleagues in the medical profession, who were wedded to the pharmaceutical and chemical and surgical models of disease. And yet here was a dietary approach that didn't involve medical procedures. It didn't involve pharmaceuticals. It didn't involve chemicals or surgery that could clear up all these degenerative diseases. So he continued that approach and eventually discovered that he could clear about 99% of all chronic illnesses using the dietary and detoxification approach. So, including he also cured Mrs. Schweitzer early of lung tuberculosis. He cured Schweitzer's daughter of something nobody even had a name for, and eventually, as time passed by, and he was longtime good friends with Albert Schweitzer, he cleared up Schweitzer's type 2 diabetes. So then intervened the Second World War and the Holocaust, and he had to flee for his life with his family. And he went to Vienna, and then when Austria went Nazi, he had to flee to France, and pretty soon the French got agitated about the Germans, and he ended up in New York City, which is where my mother, Charlotte, met her husband, my father, Erwin Strauss, and that was just before the Second World War and the Holocaust. So Gerson continued his practice in New York City, and at the time, tuberculosis was a big deal. It was a big problem.
Right, right.
And since he had gotten famous in Germany for having cured tuberculosis of all kinds, not just skin tuberculosis, but lung tuberculosis, kidney, bone tuberculosis, and then whatever else presented along with tuberculosis. He initially attacked tuberculosis, but by that time, the Rockefeller Foundation had begun to build cancer up as a major profit center, and that's what they were doing. They were building it up as a major profit center, and so he started to address cancer with the same therapy as he did tuberculosis. Since his first 2 or 3 cancer cases in Germany had cleared up very nicely, and ever since then he was kind of obsessed with the idea that he had something to offer in the cancer question. And from then on, as cancer increasingly took center stage as a major fearful dread disease, and tuberculosis faded with more better treatment, better sanitation, and so forth. And eventually, he became well known for his cancer therapy, the cancer therapy we still use, and the cancer therapy that still works very nicely. Thank you. Okay. So Gerson continued his cancer treatment, and his colleagues in New York were appalled at this because he could reverse and prevent cancer without use of any medical or surgical techniques or pharmaceuticals. And at the time, the medical world was dominated by the Rockefeller Foundation, and Rockefeller was the main force behind turning U.S. medicine into a drug vending machine.
Right. Yeah.
So
creating customers, not cures.
Exactly. Yeah, and if you consider them, just as a little side effect here, let me ask you, with all the billions spent on medical research, and the billions contributed to various different single disease organizations, can you tell me a single chronic illness that has been cured in the last 25 years?
I don't think they have one.
Not one.
I mean, as a matter of fact, I was reading an article the other day because of the homeless situation going on in California that's starting to spread around. They said that tuberculosis is coming back, and it's an incurable disease.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not, of course, because Dr. Gerson cured it quite handily. As a matter of fact, are you familiar with the big ski resorts in Switzerland, in Gstaad and Kitzbühel, and
well, I've never been there, but I know about them.
Well, you know about them. These huge hotels that are on these high mountains, and they're ski resorts.
Yeah.
They didn't start out that way. They started out as tuberculosis sanatoria back in the 1900s, early 1900s. Because it was believed that tuberculosis was caused by the bad air and crowded conditions in cities, and so the people who had money would spend money to get away and to be housed in these tuberculosis sanatoria in the high mountains with a clear air, and the pure air was much more conducive, supposedly, to good health. Well. This went along for quite a while, and since there were a lot of people with money and a lot of people with tuberculosis, these hotels were built all over, Gstaad and Kitzbühel and all of these beautiful, big, huge hotels, grand hotels in the high mountains. Well, when Dr. Gerson started to become famous for having cured tuberculosis using diet and nutrition, and had nothing to do with the crowded conditions in cities, all of the people started to use that instead of going to these high mountain, extremely expensive resorts for the cure, because they could do it right at home in their kitchen. And suddenly, these big, huge hotels had to find something better to do with their space and their time, because people were not coming to them for TB anymore.
Right. And
that's when they all converted to being ski resorts.
Huh. Okay. Didn't know that. That's
yeah. So, but of course, in New York City, with the Rockefellers behind cancer as a dread disease, as a profit center, they were not interested whatsoever in curing anything, much as the situation is today.
Right.
And so they spent much of their time and energy and effort slandering and opposing Dr. Gerson and his methods, and writing. They Dr. Morris Fishbein was the head of the AMA at the time, and he spent a lot of his. He was the editor of the Journal of the American Medical Association, and he spent a lot of his time and editorial space bad mouthing Dr. Gerson and other natural cures.
Mm-hmm.
So you can still find some of those articles. I mean, they're really, really nasty. He was an expert at that. And everybody else in the medical profession was scared of him because he wrote such vicious stuff. But eventually it got to the point where the Rockefellers could see that this guy was, if they didn't stop him, that he was going to ruin their whole plan of building cancer into a huge business.
Right. Yeah, and that's one of the things that I even see these days is, and one of the reasons that I don't donate to cancer research when you see it on TV. Oh, St. Jude's, we're going to do cancer research for the kids. And it's always, we're researching better ways to do chemo and radiation for treating cancer. Right. But that's all they ever do is chemo and radiation.
Well, that's because, consider the effect. If they adopted the Gerson therapy, okay, the Gerson therapy does not depend on expensive drugs, on big expensive radiation machines, on expensive surgeries in hospitals and so forth. And the oncologists know that no matter what they do to treat a symptom, they're not treating the underlying cause.
Right.
And so the disease will eventually recur.
Yeah, and that's what I tried to. Sorry to interrupt, but I mean, I tried to tell that to my mom when she got cancer. They caught it early, so But I tried to send her the books for the Gerson diet and try to tell her to do something alternative, and I hear this from everybody, so it almost makes you want to stop trying to tell them about it. The answer to me is always, "But the doctor said."
Yes, my doctor said.
Right.
And people call me up in desperate situations every day, and they ask me. They say, "I've just been diagnosed with something horrible, and my doctor says that I've got two months to live, and I heard about the Gerson therapy, and what do you have to offer me?" Right. And so I tell them about it, and I describe the Gerson therapy, and they say, "Well, but my doctor says." Mm-hmm. I said, "Well, you might listen to him, or you might want to listen to him then, because if you had the confidence in your doctor to repair the damage or to heal you, you wouldn't have called me in the first place, isn't it?"
Right.
So having called me, seeking out help, because your doctor can't do anything about it, maybe you might want to listen to what I have to say. So, but my doctor says is a common refrain. People are so brainwashed that the guys in the white coats know what they're doing because they have these certificates all over their walls, and they have meetings, they have tumor boards, and they have very powerful and deadly chemotherapy, and they have huge machines. And so forth, but they can't cure the disease or prevent it.
Aren't they even kind of restricted from prescribing anything except chemo and radiation in terms of cancer, and under threat of maybe they'll lose their license?
It's not maybe. It's more than just lose their license nowadays. Now, when people are actually healing disease. There are a certain number of doctors who try working outside the box and actually healing the disease. When that happens, they are actually in danger of their lives now. In the past 3 years, well over 100 doctors or chiropractors or naturopaths or nutritionists have been murdered. Because they've been healing disease that is worth too much money to treat, And so, there's and you know that it's a problem. You know that it's a conspiracy because with 100 doctors having been murdered or disappeared or suicided, there hasn't been a single suspect. There hasn't been a single investigation. No cause of death. Cause of death is often suicide, including 5 shots in the back,
Yeah, of course.
or just plain disappeared.
Right.
And there's no investigation, no government word, no word in the newspapers,
You don't.
nothing.
You'd almost think Hillary Clinton was behind it.
I'm sure they'll find some way to blame her. Uh, but the and by the way, as much as I dislike the current regime, Hillary Clinton was no angel.
Oh no, not even
She
close.
she gave an hour-long speech in praise of Monsanto on the campaign trail.
Well, I stand in favor of using seeds and products that have a proven track record that you say, and I agree, is scientifically provable, and continue to try to make the case to those who are skeptical that they may not know what they're eating already, because the question of genetically modified food or hybrids has gone on for many, many years.
And I'm sorry, that's enough for me. I can't support anybody who supports the most evil corporation on the planet.
Yeah, I tell people around here about because they spray Roundup everywhere around here to control the weeds. I live in the middle of farm country, and even the Amish people do it. And I keep asking them, why do you spray this stuff all over the ground? You know it's poisonous. Well, it kills the weeds, and can't be that bad. It's like, then I have to go through the history of who Monsanto is. Agent Orange in Vietnam, and how they're still having problems over there because of all the spraying that we did.
Oh yeah.
And they just came down. A court actually sided with the plaintiff in a case against Monsanto, and they stated twice that yes, Roundup does cause cancer. It's like, well, no kidding.
Well, the World Health Organization has identified the glyphosate, which is the main component. They claim to be the active component of Roundup, to be a Class 2 carcinogen.
Right.
And so there's the 2 cases that you're citing with multi-million dollar awards to the plaintiffs. They have 11,000 cases queued up behind them. Same thing. 11,000.
Yeah, I'm sure Monsanto is fighting tooth and nail too to stop that from happening.
Well, Bayer just bought Monsanto.
Yeah, that was just last year, wasn't it?
Yeah, a couple of years ago. So they are now in deep yogurt because they have, with the purchase of Monsanto, they have bought the liability for all of those 11,000 lawsuits.
Right. Good. Well, good luck to them.
Whoops.
But the other thing I always try to explain to people about the chemo and radiation. I mean, well, take the case, the glyphosate. Okay, that's poison. You're putting poison in your body, you get cancer. So how are they going to treat it? They treat it with chemo. Does anybody really know where chemo actually came from?
Well, yes, of course.
Yeah, it was mustard gas used in World War I.
Right.
And that's where they came up with that one. And then, of course, so you're putting more poison in your body. That's not going to do good for you. And then they come up with hitting you with radiation. And last time I checked, radiation actually causes cancer.
Yeah. Do you remember? The atom bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki?
Yeah.
And the cancer they had for years and years and years afterwards. And Fukushima
and look at Chernobyl.
Chernobyl, exactly. Radiation causes cancer.
Yeah, I just saw.
I don't know what these people are thinking, if they're thinking at all.
I actually just saw a show about this guy who's a fisherman. He fishes all over the world, and he actually got permission to go to Chernobyl to catch fish. And they had him in a hazmat suit, and he could still only stay. He could only stay there for 5 days, because after that he'd overdose on the radiation and start causing more problems. It's like, yeah, you're going to get cancer. Back in the 50s, I believe it was 50s or 60s, when they made Ben-Hur with John Wayne, they shot some of the footage out on the old testing sites in Nevada, and a whole bunch of people who worked on that film came down with cancer.
What a surprise.
Yeah, and look at the depleted uranium over in the Middle East that we've been shooting all over the place.
Absolutely.
You know.
Yeah, so
they called it Gulf War syndrome, but to try to be able to blow it off.
When the Iraqi woman has a child, the first thing they do, they don't count his fingers anymore. They count how many heads he has. Really.
Whether or not he glows in the dark.
Really. Because there is basically a layer of depleted uranium underneath the top few inches of topsoil all over the country.
Right.
In the civilian population in southern Iraq, the Iraqi doctors are reporting very large increases in cancer, leukemia, diabetes, immune system disorders, and of course birth defects in the newborns.
And then he had, what's his name? Dr. Rocky, I believe his name was, who was actually hired by the government to go over there and figure out how to clean it up. And he got really sick, and of course they treated him with the conventional treatment. And I think he's had like somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 operations or something. I'm probably wrong on that. It's probably more, but he's had a lot. And he got sick, and they asked him, "Well, what's your conclusion?" He said, "There's no way to clean it up."
Yeah. Nice.
So,
Well, the question is, if he had 50 operations, at some point you got to say, wait a minute, is this really working?
right.
And try something else. But unfortunately, money stuffed in their ears and their eyes doesn't allow them to see anything beyond the dollar signs.
Yeah, and we're all the guinea pigs.
We're not guinea pigs.
We're the piggy banks.
We're not guinea pigs. No. We're not guinea pigs anymore.
We
are. Yeah, we're the piggy banks.
Right.
They exist to drain us of all of our resources before they toss us on the scrap heap.
Yeah, that was the one thing I said to my mom too. I was like, what the difference between doing the Gerson diet and doing the chemo and radiation is? And she goes, well, what? And I'm like, well, your bank account's going to be empty.
Right,
doing
exactly.
the other one. That's that, and then they're not going to have any more use to treat you. They're going to tell you you're all better.
Oh, they'll say, well, nothing more we can do for you.
Right. Well, see, and that was one of the when I found out about the whole Gerson. I remember I saw it on G. Edward Griffin's website. I got a little more in depth of it when a friend of mine, Nancy, who's working on a script to do a biopic movie about Max Gerson's life, I read a little bit more about it. And he was taking stage 4 cancer patients into hospice care. I mean, these people were essentially the walking dead. And by the end of the treatment, they were walking out of there cancer free.
Well, who was doing this?
My friend Nancy Kramer. She's doing a film.
Yeah. I understand, but who was taking stage 4 cancer?
Max Gerson.
Yeah, Max Gerson. Absolutely right. Yeah, it doesn't matter. He always had. People would always surprise him. He would take people who he thought were well beyond any help from even what he could do, and he would take them, and they would miraculously recover. So he eventually said, where there's life, there's hope. As long as you have some life in you, your body is amazing in its ability to heal.
Right. and all of that's on a diet. And given some of the stuff that we're eating nowadays, there was that great movie that came out years ago called Super Size Me.
Oh, yeah.
And just watching the guy put himself through that, I was just kind of like, I couldn't even do that. I mean,
Morgan Spurlock.
Yeah, Morgan. It was like watching him and you could see the physical changes in his body. Then, of course, you have the doctor's report saying, one doctor saying, stop doing this.
Please stop doing this. You're killing yourself.
Right.
Your liver is turning into a fat pudding.
Right. And well, here's another thing that I'd like to get into, if you don't mind, regarding Gerson. When he had to leave, before he had to leave Germany and move out. Now, we know that he had a lot of opposition with the medical profession here in the United States. I mean, even the Senate had hearings on him, telling him to stop. What was the pushback in Europe, or was there any?
Oh, it was terrible. Not only was he operating outside of the medical paradigm that everybody had learned and that they took as delivered truth, and plus which they had the pharmaceutical companies backing them up.
Right. So it was the same.
But on top of that, he was Jewish, and
Right.
the atmosphere in Europe, certainly before, and certainly Germany, before Second World War, was poisonous for Jewish anybody,
Right.
much less people who were going up against the establishment anyway. Anybody who did something slightly out of whack with the established truth would be branded with the physics at the time, they were looking at subatomic particles and so forth. They called that Jewish physics because the physicists who were doing the work were Jewish.
Right.
And so he got branded with that as well. Jewish medicine, Jewish this, Jewish that, right? Jewish mathematics. It was worse than just the opposition from the pharmaceutical companies and from conventional doctors who were making a fortune off of tuberculosis that they could not cure. And suddenly here was this doctor who could clear it up, if you just to quote a doctor from New York, by boiling carrots in a pot. And they were incensed about that because they were making fortunes treating tuberculosis with things that they didn't that didn't work. And here comes this guy and says, "Oh no, just change what you have for lunch." And the tuberculosis would go away. They were so angry about that they would organize, like at medical conventions and things. His name was like a curse word.
Right. And I still see a lot of that even today when I go to the Cancer Control Society convention in Los Angeles every year.
Yeah. Yes.
And there's a website out there that just calls it all quack science or quack
that's
medicine.
right. By the way, are you aware where the word quack comes from?
I only thought it came from a duck. I never really got into the origins of it.
So back a long time ago, maybe 100 years ago, maybe more, 150, doctors, one of the remedies that they would use was mercury. Mercury. And you know how poisonous mercury is.
Yeah,
It's the most
toxin.
The most poisonous non-radioactive metal that there is, right?
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, George Washington did not die of a cold, of a very bad cold. He died because his doctor gave him a teaspoonful of mercury for his very bad cold. They had such a bad reputation at the time that their nicknames were quacks. Mercury is also called quicksilver,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And so what they called doctors who used mercury as a remedy, they called them quacksalvers. Quacksalver. And they just shortened it eventually to quack. And so doctors would pejoratively be named quacks. And so doctors have now taken up that pejorative and applied it to doctors who don't want to do what they want to do. Okay, so you don't want to use drugs and operations.
And that's kind of, I don't know if I would call that, I don't think that's called irony, but I think it's pretty funny that they would do that because, when you get around mercury, look what happened with the fluorescent light bulbs. You break one, you're supposed to call a hazmat team to come clean it up because of the mercury that's in.
Exactly.
Yet these same doctors that are calling homeopathic physicians, quacks, are the same ones who are giving you vaccines, and the stabilizer in it is mercury.
Exactly. Quicksilver, which gave rise to the word quack itself.
Right. So, I mean, there's a disconnect there that I don't think they're getting.
Well, whoever accused Americans of having the ability to do critical thinking anymore?
Yeah, that's true. They're not. The education system is certainly not teaching them that skill anymore.
Well, of course, fluoride, both fluoride and glyphosate or Roundup and mercury all affect the brain's function. And so they're dumbing us down chemically as well as dumbing us down by removing our educational system.
Yeah, and I remember when I was in grade school, and long ago as that was, they would have these days where they come in and give you a checkup, and in the school, they had a doctor come in or the school nurse, and they would give you a cup of fluoride to rinse your mouth out with. And I heard one of the teachers say, and I still remember this, that fluoride is not good for your teeth. It actually destroys calcium. And I'm like, well, why are we drinking this then? Why are we rinsing our mouths out with it? It's destroying calcium. Well, just go ahead and do it. Just do it because you're told to do it.
Mm-hmm. When I went into the Navy in 1967, I went into the Navy because they were threatening to draft me into the Army. So I went to Officer Candidate School. And since I was going to be an officer and they were going to be responsible for taking care of my dental and medical needs, right? Mm-hmm. They wanted to treat everybody with fluoride, fluoridate the teeth, because that was the myth at the time, that fluoride was good for your teeth and it would protect your teeth against cavities and so forth. And when we were marched off to the dental offices to have our teeth fluoridated, I declined. I said, no, I'm not going to have anyone do that. And the next person I got to talk to was a Navy captain, dentist. I was an enlisted officer candidate, right. And this Navy captain was about 22 ranks above me. And he said, now what's this nonsense that you say you don't want to have your teeth fluoridated? I said, well, because I believe that fluoride is a deadly poison. Oh, son, you just don't know. And I said, doctor, he was a dentist. I said, doctor, you just don't know, sir, captain.
That must have went over well.
Yeah, exactly. I said, it's a deadly poison. He said, no, where did you hear that? I said, from my grandfather. He said, well, dental science says. I said, my grandfather can cure cancer. Can you? He looked at me long and hard. He said, I could order you to have your teeth fluoridated. I said, well, you could order me to do that. All you would get is a court-martial because I will not do that. You could order me to take arsenic too.
Right.
I'm not going to do it. It's poison. And he looked at me for a long time and he said, "Oh, get out of my office." And I did not have my teeth fluoridated.
Yeah, they did that when I went into the Marines too.
But nowadays, if you refuse, now they'll court-martial you.
Yeah, they were back when I enlisted in the Marines, and they did the same thing. They gave us the little paper cup with the fluoride in it. Mm-hmm. And God forbid you turned it down, because they would run you ragged.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, yeah, they have their way of torturing you until you do it. But they didn't do that to me, because I'm considerably older than you are.
Right.
I'm as a matter of fact, 2 weeks, it'll be my 76th birthday.
Oh, there you go. But when I met you at the memorial service for your mom, yeah. I wouldn't have figured you were that old.
Well, yeah, but that's because the Gerson therapy is also an anti-agathic. You understand the word?
Yes.
Anti-agathic is anti-aging
Right.
therapy.
Yeah.
Because what we experience with the people around us, when we think of somebody who's 55 or 65 years old, we have in our mind an image of how much damage we've done over the years, and what happens to our skin, what happens to our spine, what happens to our bones, our teeth, and so forth, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
Well,
but it's not this. But it's not necessary. Our bodies renew themselves every 18 months. Totally, 100% of the body renews itself, is replaced every 18 months. That means on average, we are always 9 months old. On average, always for our entire lives.
look,
So
judging from some of the people that I've seen, you wouldn't know it. I mean, they
it's
again really poor diets and lack of exercise and whatever. And you're seeing people who are around my age or maybe a little bit younger who are in so much worse condition.
yes.
And and I'm not the pinnacle of health by any stretch of the imagination, but I know better than to let myself go that much.
Well, consider the fact that your body will replace itself every 18 months.
Right.
It has to replace itself with something, right? So it has to have the raw materials from somewhere. And the raw materials are what you put in your mouth. So you're feeding your system the materials with which to replace itself, to renew itself completely in 18 months. But if you eat lousy food, if you eat fast food and GMO food and canned, bottled, boxed, denatured food, and all cooked and nothing, no enzymes, nothing fresh, and that's what Americans do.
Right.
What you're doing is you're putting in spare parts. You're putting in the repair parts that are garbage. They're from the junkyard. So of course, in a year and a half, if you've built your body from zero in a year and a half with junk, you're going to have a junk body.
Right.
The good news is, however, that if you anytime you choose to change that that cycle and start eating good, whole, organic, fresh foods, and not eating animal protein, and not eating salt and fat and food chemicals, your body will say, "Oh, good. Now I can start using manufacturer's original parts to build the body for next year." And your body will once again, it will be replaced in 18 months with a brand spanking new body. That's its job. That's what it does.
Right.
And all of us do that, by the way. So we all just by dint of having human DNA, our bodies do that. That's a gift from God, right?
Right.
And the fact that we abuse it so badly is why we age, and we age prematurely. So what you see around you of people who are my age, 76 years old, what you see around you of these people who are just about to expire, or bent over with osteoporosis, or 300 pounds, or are crippled with arthritis, right? This is all premature aging. It is not how human beings are supposed to age. So a good, healthy human life span should be between 110 and 120 years.
Yeah, that's what I remember reading that a while ago, was that the human body was designed to live well over 100 years.
Exactly. But we abuse it so badly that we expire after maybe 65 or 60 or even 70 years.
And I think that some of that's not even intentional. I think it's just because people are so used to going to the grocery store, they're not really aware of what they're buying. Even if they're buying health produce, they're buying stuff that has been genetically modified.
Exactly.
Or they go and they buy all these pre-prepared meals.
Yep.
and like spaghetti, all that canned stuff. I can't even eat canned food anymore. It does not taste good to me because I can get it fresh now. I can grow my own.
Yeah.
So, but
Yeah. So what? It may be unintentional on the part of the consumer, but it's not unintentional on the part of the supervising agencies who make sure that the food that we're eating is safe.
well, yeah, and here there's a lot. A lot of the farmers are very much restricted from what kind of fertilizers that they can put in the soil.
Exactly.
Especially if they're industrial farmers, that's what they do. They grow whatever and package it and ship it off to market. They're told by the government that the only kind of fertilizer that's really acceptable is the ammonium nitrate, but that's not putting anything back into the soil.
Exactly. And that's the problem. So we are under this blanket of secrecy that is aimed at keeping us sick and keeping us subservient and subject to doctors.
Right. And I think that's and it's really a shame because I think there are really some good doctors out there who really want to move in that direction, but again, they don't.
And if they do, I just told you,
Yeah.
in the last 3 years, over 100 doctors have been murdered, suicided, disappeared, or otherwise done away with.
Right. And look at what happened with your grandfather too. He had to actually leave the United States and set up practice down in Mexico because he was being hammered on by the government so much.
Stop.
No.
He didn't set up in Mexico.
Oh, I thought he did.
No, he was in New York. and he was assassinated in New York.
Right.
My mother set up in Mexico.
Oh, okay. I had that part wrong then. I thought that your grandfather had done it.
Because it's absolutely impossible for a doctor, for an MD, to practice the Gerson therapy in the United States. They will take away his license. They will kill him. They'll do something. They'll destroy his reputation. They'll take away his license. They'll do something. This is absolute. They do not want word one of the Gerson therapy and the possibilities and the opportunities with the Gerson therapy to escape into the public.
Right. Now, let's get into that part. Having him in New York and getting assassinated. How exactly did that take place?
Well, I wish I could tell you with absolute certainty how exactly it took place. But nobody keeps documentary evidence of that kind of stuff around, right? But he came back. He went on. Let me see how this happened. Oh yes, he went on the radio on the Long John Nebel show on WOR in New York City, where Long John Nebel had invited him to be part of a panel on elective surgery. Elective surgery. That means surgery that wasn't an emergency, it didn't have to be done, but you could choose to do it now or later, right? Like for instance, an arthritic knee, right? So he was supposed to be part of a panel of other doctors talking about elective surgery. And Long John started the panel discussion. And by the way, I have a CD of that interview, or most of the interview. And he started talking about the various different things. And when he got around to my grandfather, the answers that Dr. Gerson gave him were so interesting and so intriguing to him and to the other panelists that they said, "Oh, listen, we don't want to speak. We want to hear what Dr. Gerson has to say." And pretty soon it evolved into an interview of Dr. Gerson by Long John Nebel. where he was talking about his experience and his therapy and the food and the Food and Drug Administration and how the food was denatured and polluted and so forth, including cigarettes and alcohol. And Long John Nebel is going, oh my God, there's all my damn sponsors, all my sponsors gone. And at one point, he actually even said, "Does anybody out there know of a job for an aspiring young broadcaster?" Because he could see all of his sponsors flying away, right? Then the questions started to come in, and questions were coming in with from all over the place. And it ran way beyond his show, and so finally he said, "Dr. Gerson, could you come on again tomorrow night and answer some more questions, because we got a stack of questions here for you?" He said, "I'd be happy to." So they scheduled him for the next night, and the next day by afternoon they called him up again and said, "We're going to have to disinvite you."
Oh, wow. Somebody made a phone call?
Somebody made a phone call.
Right.
All of his sponsors said, you know, cigarettes and alcohol and food and, you know, the canned food, processed food, fast food, you know, they all called. Every single one of them said, you have him on. We will never sponsor you or anybody else on WOR again, ever.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And so, you know, that's where it kind of started. Then there was when he went on he was invited to testify before a congressional subcommittee about his therapy, and the AMA put on a full court press to get other witnesses up there in large numbers to prevent him from saying much. And then when there was going to be a press conference after this stunning information came out, and they organized a party on the other side of town right after the hearing, with free booze and free food. And all the reporters went over there.
Of course.
Not a single reporter was left. And so, but in this case, Raymond Graham Swing, who was one of the top broadcasters of the time, he did his commentary the next day on the testimony that he had heard in front of Congress. And WABC, I think it was inundated with telephone calls and letters, and people wanted to know more contact of Dr. Gerson and how to get in touch with him and so forth. And they got him. They instead of getting the letters to him or to someone who would answer them, they gave it to a doctor. They gave them all sacks of mail to a doctor who basically threw them away.
Wow.
But there was such a response, and people, you know, the information had gotten out into the public that's, I believe, when the plot was hatched, because it was pretty much the Rockefeller Foundation that financed the destruction of Dr. Gerson.
Right.
What they first did, he fell ill, okay, and he had to be taken to the hospital. And when he got back from the hospital, the whole manuscript for his book, the entire manuscript, had been stolen, and he had to start from scratch to redo his book that had taken him 3 years to write. He had started back from scratch. He fired his secretary because his secretary, he found out, was working for the AMA. and he rewrote the book. But the reason he had fallen ill was he started being fed arsenic.
Now, did he know how, anybody find out how the arsenic was getting into him, or?
It's pretty certain that the secretary who was working for the AMA had put arsenic into his afternoon cup of coffee
Wow.
because he had no other sources of arsenic.
Right.
None.
Right.
And so he had fired her when he had to redo the book because he knew that she had stolen things from him. But his body was just too he couldn't withstand the damage that the arsenic had done, and eventually he got a fungal infection of his lungs, and they had holes in his lungs, and he expired from that.
Right.
His charming colleagues, of course, without benefit of autopsy or biopsy, claimed that he had died of lung cancer.
There's a guy who knows how to cure cancer, and they're gonna blame it on cancer.
Of course, because
Right.
that would discredit both him and his treatment, right?
Right.
All in one.
Yeah.
But there was no biopsy or autopsy.
Right. So there was, and
Right.
anybody again who had the ability to think critically would kind of take that with a grain of salt, saying, "Well, how do you know?"
Right. Exactly.
So.
Exactly. But of course, the media, as it is now, was totally dominated by pharmaceutical companies
Right.
with their advertising.
Yeah, and 9 out of 10 doctors say smoking is good for you back then too.
That's right.
So.
That's right. 9 out of 10 doctors. Lucky strike. 9 out of 10 doctors choose Lucky Strike.
And what is it? 4 out of 5 dentists prefer this fluoridated toothpaste.
Yeah, exactly.
So, okay. So
Never mind the dental fluorosis, right?
Yeah, never mind. Yeah, those
Never
cavities in your teeth.
Never mind the association of fluoride with osteosarcoma.
Right. Yeah. After my experiences with the dentist, they're lucky if I ever show up on their doorstep again.
My grandfather, my mother, both considered dentists the most dangerous medical profession because they have this belief, this deeply held belief, and you can't argue them out of it, that everything that they're responsible for begins and ends in the mouth, and there's no effect beyond that.
Yeah, and except for the cases where the mercury fillings were causing so much damage to people that they finally had the fillings removed and all their health problems cleared up.
Oh, that.
Yeah, well, forget about that part.
How about the part where the plaque in your coronary arteries turns out to be dental plaque that has migrated into the heart valves?
Yeah, I believe it. It's amazing. Yeah, but nothing. They can't do anything beyond what's in the mouth. So.
Right.
But,
So they say they disclaim all responsibility for anything beyond what's in the mouth.
Yeah, when I had surgery on my back, I got an infection in one of my teeth, and when I went back to see my orthopedic surgeon, and believe me, I regret getting the surgery to this day, but when he found out that I had an infection in my tooth, he freaked out. Because this was almost immediately after I had the back surgery. He freaked out because he knew, you get that infection, it gets around, it's going to get into places it's not supposed to be that we just operated on.
Uh-huh.
So, yeah, but dentists say everything, it stops and ends right in the mouth.
That's right. And they just are blind to anything beyond that.
Yeah, not to mention the effect that when they fluoridate your mouth, the effect that has on the brain because it is a neurotoxin.
And not only that, but it causes all connective tissue problems.
Right.
It makes your bones brittle. It causes dental fluorosis, and that's not destroying the calcium in your mouth. What it's doing is it's interfering with the proper formation of calcium in your teeth. But but that's the visible part. How about the rest, where it's interfering with the calcium formation in your bones?
Right.
right? You can't see that, but it's the same calcium that you have in your mouth.
And they can't get these people who are a more advanced age can't figure out why they have osteoporosis.
Yes.
And what can I do about it? I can take these calcium tablets. It's like, well, why don't you try eating like broccoli and cauliflower and spinach and all these other calcium-rich foods?
Instead of eating animal protein.
Right.
Basically, I see someone who has osteoporosis, and I saw lots of that on a recent cruise, on a cruise ship. Boy, did I see! Oh, did I see! It was like a wounded ward, a geriatric wounded ward. It was unbelievable.
Huh.
But there were lots of people bent over from the osteoporosis, right? And I could tell you, I guarantee you that if I asked them, and because I've done this before, if I asked them, do you eat a lot of steak? Oh, I love steak, right? Because osteoporosis is really the after effect of way too much animal protein.
Right. Well, and then the other thing I see people do too is when they cook some of these calcium foods like broccoli and cauliflower, they'll boil it and then they'll throw the water away. It's like, well, where do you think all the minerals and the calcium went?
Well, that's why you don't want to depend on that for the calcium. You have to depend on raw food and juices, because just the calcium, eating just calcium-rich foods is useless unless you have the coenzymes so that you can metabolize that calcium and put it into your bones. Without that, the calcium will circulate around and settle out in places like your carotid artery or your heart valves or some other inconvenient place,
Right.
Arthritic joints, things like that. So you need the enzymes, and enzymes are killed by cooking. So
Right.
so you need raw foods. You need the raw foods for the enzymes in order to metabolize the calcium properly.
Right. Right. And a lot of people, they're just not educated in it. That's I think is half the problem. Not even when the VA will have me talk to a dietitian because they say my cholesterol is too high. Say, well, this is the kind of food you're supposed to be eating. And it's like, well, what do you eat? And I tell them, and they're like, we don't understand why your calcium's so high or your cholesterol's so high. Then it's like, it's probably genetics. I don't know.
Well, and that's nonsense as well. Yeah,
Well,
genetics explains what the structure is like.
right.
The hand you're dealt is genetics. Your health status is how you play that hand. You can't change your genetics,
Right.
but you can change how you play the hand you're dealt. And that's called epigenetics. And what that is it's what genetic tendencies will manifest when you treat them in a certain way. And treat them in a certain way means your lifestyle, what you eat and how you eat it, and the choices you make.
Right.
And if you make choice A, then your genetic structure will respond in a certain way. And if you make choice B, it will respond in a different way, because that's what your genetics do. Your genes determine how your body responds to any kind of challenge. So the trick is not to challenge it. Don't challenge it by feeding it crap.
Right. Well, the other thing that they want to do is they keep telling me we're gonna prescribe you statin drugs, and I was like, don't bother, I won't take them.
Right.
Because I know exactly what they're gonna do.
That's right. They'll destroy your liver,
Destroy your brain.
destroy the brain, and they don't do anything to reduce the possibility of death.
Right. I actually think they kind of enhance it.
Exactly.
So,
Well, by destroying your internal organs.
right. So and it's the same thing when I tell them for pain management, I keep telling them, don't prescribe me any narcotics. And that's the only thing that they do. They're really big on pushing drugs.
Oh, absolutely.
So, I mean,
So
they
so
must
if
have
you
some
if you're
kind of a
interested
deal with it, with the
if you're
pharmaceutical
interested,
companies.
of course, if you're interested in pain control, check out earthing.
Yes, I've already looked into that.
And because that is a very powerful pain control. And number two, the Gerson Therapy with its coffee enemas is also very powerful pain control, pain elimination, because it eliminates the cause of the pain, which is toxicity.
Yeah, I've heard about the coffee enemas before, but explain to me exactly how does that work?
Right. What the problem the problem that we're attacking with that is that over the course of the years, you have ingested way more poison than your liver can handle. The liver is the big filter in your body,
Mm-hmm.
and when it gets overloaded with poisons from the crap food that they give us, when it gets overloaded with poisons, it can no longer filter toxicity out of your bloodstream, and so the toxicity floats around in your blood, irritating nerve endings. And so you're going to end up with migraine. You'll end up with arthritis. You'll end up with some kind of neurological pain. And you go to a doctor, and he'll say, "Oh, we can mask that," and he'll give you a pill that will put a Band-Aid over the pain
Right.
for a while until your body metabolizes it and breaks it up into components, and then those metabolized fragments then act as further toxicity and more pain. That's where addiction comes from. Is because the substance that the analgesic substance that masks the pain will eventually be broken up into its components and cause more pain. And so you say, oh, it worked for a couple hours, but I need more now. And that's addiction. That's the roots of addiction.
Right.
Instead of saying, wait a minute, the problem is that your liver is full of toxins and we got to get rid of those toxins, and instead of putting more in. So how do you clear the liver of toxins? I mean, if you have an oil filter in your car, you can take it out and put in a new oil filter. If you have a pool filter for your swimming pool, you can backflush it and clear the filter of dirt and grime, and it'll work again. But you can't do that with your liver. How do you clear your liver of all of these accumulated toxins of a lifetime? That's where the coffee enema comes in. When you administer caffeine rectally, you put the caffeine into the coffee solution into the descending colon, and the hemorrhoidal vein surrounds the descending colon and can absorb from the contents of the colon. It can absorb the caffeine and potassium also, but the caffeine is the important part right there. It transports, because it's a vein, not an artery. It's a drainage system rather than a distribution system. So it drains the caffeine right into your liver. It transports it right into your liver by the portal venous system. The portal system is a drainage system that ends up in the liver. Now it takes the caffeine that is just absorbed from the solution that you have in your descending colon. It takes that caffeine and dumps it into the liver, where it stimulates the production of bile. And the bile flushes out of the liver, taking with it a lot of the toxicity that is accumulated in there. So now the toxicity gets dumped out of the liver and is in your intestinal tract, and eventually migrates out. So that's how you get detoxification. And remember, what you're experiencing when you're experiencing pain, most of the pain, if it's not a mechanical damage, most of the pain you're experiencing comes from toxicity. So when you remove the toxicity, you remove the source of the pain. The result is pain relief in a matter of a couple of minutes.
Wow.
Yeah, it's stunning. And so migraine headaches or neuralgia, something, fibromyalgia, um, will disappear like in a matter of minutes.
Now there was because we're dealing with the liver here on this. There's I don't know if I wouldn't call it a fad diet or however you would categorize it, but there's this thing called the keto diet.
Oh boy.
Okay, now I read about it. I tried it, and quite honestly, I wasn't overly impressed with it. I didn't like the food that I was eating for the most part, but it just seemed, you're eating that much fatty foods. It says, well, because it's going to take your body, and you're going to, because you're eating all this fat, your body's going to learn to burn fat instead of sugars. Give me your take on that, because I'm kind of curious, because there's so many people that are doing it.
Oh yeah. My take on the keto diet is it is a perfect diet for generating cancer. Perfect.
There you go.
Absolutely perfect. And so we're going to have a huge response in cancer cases from people eating the keto diet.
Right.
It's perfect. It's lots of animal protein, lots of animal fat, and cancer loves that stuff. That's why we forbid people on the Gerson Therapy from animal protein and fats. All fats. Cancer loves fat.
Okay, when the doctors say the cancer loves sugar too, so.
Well, I'll tell you, sugar, the consumption, the feeding of the hunger of cancer for sugar is an effect rather than a cause of cancer.
Okay.
Okay. The reason is what that effect is when you have a cancer cell or a tumor, right? That doesn't exist in an oxidative environment. In other words, it's anaerobic.
Right.
So that it's short of oxygen, and that's why the cells have turned to cancer rather than doing their normal job. Otto Warburg, Nobel laureate, back in the 20s, found that he could actually induce cancer by depriving cells of oxygen. Okay, so what it does is it says, okay, I can't produce energy using oxygen because my oxygen metabolism is screwed up, but I must survive, and so I'll try a different way of creating energy, and so it goes into a fermentative metabolism, and so you'll find cancer works in a fermentative metabolism, fermenting rather than burning things.
Right.
The problem with that is that oxidation, an oxidative metabolism, creates energy at about 15 to 17 times more, faster, more efficiently than fermentation. So cancer, in order to create the same amount of energy that it needs without resorting to oxygen, and by using its pretty much crippled fermentative metabolism, is about 15 times less efficient at creating energy than oxidation. And so it's going to need a lot more fuel to create the same amount of energy. And so it'll look for the most concentrated source of fuel that there is. And fat is one of those fuels.
Right.
Which is why people with cancer experience cachexia. You know what that is?
No.
Cachexia is where there's a rapid wasting, the cancer is grabbing a hold of all the fat in your body and burning it.
Right. Okay. Now, I know what it is because I've seen dealt with cancer before, and yeah, there's a really rapid weight loss.
Right, and that's because the cancer is so inefficient in making energy that it's grabbing any source of energy it can, and fat is a highly concentrated form of energy. So is sugar. So when you eat sugar, if you have cancer, the first grab at that sugar is going to be the cancer
Right.
because it needs that concentrated energy in order to continue doing what it does. But that's not a good thing, right?
I would
So
say
yeah,
no.
so yeah, you're feeding it. You're feeding it. You're encouraging it. But it didn't cause your cancer. What caused your cancer is an acid environment. With your diet, you have acidified your body.
Right.
And when you acidify your body, it does all kinds of nasty things in terms of disabling important functions, in terms of oxygen, disabling oxygen transport in your bloodstream, in terms of thickening your blood. There's a whole raft of bad things that happen when your pH goes below 7.
Yeah,
Or
I was actually gonna ask you about that because I remember seeing there was some medical articles about changing your body chemistry to a more alkaline state instead of
yes,
acidic.
yes. Did they tell you how to change your body
Well,
chemistry?
you mix some drink mix that you mix up and I forget
No, that's
what it
that's a
is.
lot of crap.
Oh, is it?
Pardon me, it's a lot of crap.
Okay.
The way you change your body chemistry is by eating vegetable-based foods rather than animal-based foods. Because the effect of animal-based foods is to acidify your body. That's why I told you that people with osteoporosis are all bent over, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's pretty sure that they've been eating steak every night for 50 years
Right.
because animal protein acidifies the body, and eventually your body says, "Oh, I can't survive this way. I've got to neutralize that acid. Where's a good source of alkaline material for me to use to neutralize it? The calcium carbonate in my bones. That's a huge source of neutralizing material, of alkaline material, so I can neutralize that acid. The problem is that you're borrowing calcium from your bones, and your body expects you to put it back with vegetables or something else.
Right.
But you're not putting it back because you're having another steak the next night, and you're having ham and eggs for breakfast, and you're having a burger for lunch.
Right.
Lots of animal protein, right?
Yeah, I can't imagine what's going on in people's bodies who are on like a McDonald's or some other kind of fast food diet.
Well, I'm telling you what's going on, right? They're acidifying their bodies. Their bodies are desperate to neutralize that acid and keep sucking calcium out of the bones in order to do so. And eventually, the bones get like spaghetti rather than rigid structural members. And that's why they're all bent over, because there's a spines collapse. Right. Their bones get all floppy, right? But it's because of the acidification caused by overdose of animal protein that they've been eating every day. You want to reverse that? Eat vegetables. Eat vegetables.
Yeah, I know some people from years ago who absolutely will not eat vegetables at all.
Oh, I have a stepdaughter like that.
Oh, yeah. Like a friend of mine, when I was in the military, he called it rabbit food, and he just wouldn't touch it.
That's okay.
So,
Well, the only thing you can say to someone like that is bye-bye.
well, I thought it was kind of funny that he didn't put these two things together. Number one, he wouldn't eat vegetables, and he had like one of the worst cases of acne I've ever seen.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Yeah.
He's not going to last very long.
All right.
I mean,
I don't know what happened to him. I haven't seen him since then, but
yeah,
good
thing.
Well, let's try go into this. Let's talk about your mom a little bit and what
Okay,
what she had done as far as the Gerson diet has gone on.
Right. Well, my mom was one of 3 sisters, and when Dr. Gerson died in 1959, he had just published his book, had sold the first printing of 3,000, which is unusual for a medical book to sell out. And he had printed another 3,000, and then he expired. So now my mother had a warehouse full of books, and how was she going to sell them? Because he couldn't sell them to patients. He couldn't go out and lecture. He was dead, right? So, but she didn't want to throw these books away. They were brilliant. So she started to go to cancer conventions and lecture about the Gerson therapy and sell books there.
Okay.
And pretty soon, the second printing was sold out, and people wanted more. And so she started printing those books, and then she got to be quite in demand on the cancer convention lecture circuit. And so she would go to these conventions constantly, and she would sell books there.
Okay.
And so she eventually, so she kept having to reprint the books.
Yeah. Did she get any pushback from the AMA on that?
Well, of course. I mean, they told her she was a quack. They said everything they could, but she didn't have a medical license, so they couldn't revoke her medical license, and they couldn't stop her from talking. Right. But so then eventually, someone from California said, if I think this is great. Because when people would say, okay, this looks like a terrific therapy, where can I get it? So, and there was nobody doing it. There was no doctor who wanted to risk his reputation, his life, his career on doing this kind of stuff against all of the conventional wisdom. So this guy from California said, look, I know this is a good thing. I want it. And I'm willing to finance it. So I'll provide the financing. I'll provide the facility. All I want you to do is come out and run it and help people to get the therapy. And they knew they'd be problems with it. So, they insisted that if anybody wanted to come and stay, they had to bring their own medical personnel, their own prescriptions and everything. All we did was run the kitchen.
Okay.
And she operated near the La Brea tar pits for a few months. And then the state of California came around with my grandfather's book under their arm. And they did a white glove inspection on everything. Toilets and kitchen and, everything. Beds, door width, door height, everything, right?
Right.
And at the end, they said, Ms. Gerson, you're not doing anything wrong here. But unless you stop doing it, we will make you prove it in court against the state of California.
So she's not doing anything wrong, but they're going to drag her into court anyway.
They're going to put her out of business.
Yeah.
And, well, she didn't have the money to fight the state of California, for heaven's sakes. So she closed it down, and somebody volunteered a place in South Bend, Indiana. A woman doctor had a facility in South Bend, Indiana, and she wanted my mother out there. So my mother packed up and she moved off to South Bend, and she generated a clinic, and the woman doctor under the auspices of this woman doctor. And everything went fine for about half a year. And then the woman doctor, who was doing well, doing fine, she was happy with the facility and everything, was found hanging in her kitchen.
Wow.
Now, there's two things wrong with that.
I can think of them.
Doctors do not hang themselves. They want to commit suicide. They have access to enough drugs, and they know how to put themselves out of misery. They just take a handful of drugs. That's number one. Number two, it was a woman. And women do not mess up their kitchen. Right?
Right.
Number three, there was no suicide note. So the sheriff immediately ruled it a suicide, closed the book on it, and that was the end of that. So that was when after a few false starts, she ended up with a clinic in Mexico.
Right.
And she trained a couple of doctors down there, and they had a hospital. And she ever since then, they've been operating in Mexico.
So the clinic is there's still a clinic down there.
There's still a clinic. We're not very happy with it because since my mother retired and could no longer make rounds, they have been doing stuff that we don't necessarily agree with. The Gerson Institute doesn't talk to us anymore. I suspect that they don't want us looking over their shoulder and making comments about, Charlotte Gerson would not approve of that. So they don't talk to us anymore.
Well, who owns the clinic now, or the institute?
The institute, there's a woman named Anita Wilson, and I got her the job, 10, 15 years ago, and she's the one running the clinic, running the institute, not the clinic. The doctors that my mother trained originally are running the clinic.
Okay. So, well, what are they doing different than at the institute?
It's not the institute. It's at the clinic.
Oh, it's at the clinic then.
They're not administering the therapy as my mother or my grandfather would have wanted.
Okay.
So I know that several people have complained that they've left the facility because they've started adding animal protein to the meals.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
and that's one of the big no-nos in the therapy.
Huge no-no. As a matter of fact, animal protein, even the World Health Organization has ruled animal protein as a class 2 carcinogen, which means probably will cause cancer.
Right.
And so, why would you give a cancer patient, something that probably will cause cancer?
Yeah, like chemo and radiation.
Exactly.
So, when I did meet you at your mother's memorial service in California,
yes,
you had brought up, you had started your own organization.
Right, because if they're not going to, if the Gerson Institute is not going to promote and further and teach the Gerson therapy that we know works, okay, in a certain form, we know works, and that with the changes they're doing is not going to work for long,
right?
Then it'll collapse, and we don't want the Gerson therapy to go away. Because just because somebody has this ego that says, oh, I know better, right? So rather than let it just evaporate, we don't want that. My sister and I and Molly Young, who you met, are continuing the work. I founded the Max Gerson Foundation to promote and further his work, carry it forward, the way that he put it together, and on his principles that we know work.
And it's pretty specific too, isn't it? The whole therapy. Extremely
so. It's very specific. And Charlotte Gerson updated Dr. Gerson's very famous book, A Cancer Therapy, into Healing the Gerson Way. And I publish Healing the Gerson Way with Gerson Media, Gerson Health Media. And so far, it's been translated and published in 20 languages, and we continue to negotiate for more. The Chinese government is building us a clinic in northern China because they have a terrible diabetes problem. They have about 100 million type 2 diabetics. 100
Wow.
million. And Harvard recently finished a study that showed that there's 400 million pre-diabetics, which means that you don't have diabetes right now, but you will.
Right.
Right? That's
And
a half a billion people right there.
I think that's like a third of their country.
Yeah,
So
it is. It is. So then once we've licked that problem, and
right.
by the way, a type 2 diabetes is a 3 to 6 week problem on the Gerson therapy. 3 to 6 weeks.
Wow.
For conventional medicine, it is incurable.
Yeah, it's lifetime. It's a lifetime.
Right. And it's complete nonsense because it's easily changed by lifestyle, excuse me, like 99% of all other chronic illnesses.
Right.
99% caused by lifestyle. So you can change, reverse, or even prevent these diseases by not stuffing burgers in your mouth. Right?
Yeah.
By not drinking beer, by not eating salt, prepared food,
So
canned, bottled, boxed,
that
GMO.
that was one of the funny things I do remember at the memorial service. I think it was one of your mother's assistants who got up to speak, and she was relating a story. And when somebody had asked your mom, "Well, what happens if I add salt to this?" and the response was, "You're gonna die."
Yep. Yeah, she took no prisoners, I'll tell you that. She just didn't have time to mess around. Did not have time. She was harsh.
Well,
But you know what? With a June Cleaver type undertone of this
right.
loving mom, this loving mom, and she said, "Yeah, what you want to die? Go ahead, die. But that's what'll happen."
And she lived pretty long. She was in her late 90s.
97, she
97.
died. Yeah.
Yeah. And everybody that I had listened to speak said she was still up and running around.
Up
So,
until her second the second break that she
oh,
fell.
okay.
The first time she shattered some bones in her pelvis, and everybody said, "Oh, even she said that's a fatal injury.
Right.
I'll never get up." And I said, "For anyone else, it is, but not for you, Mom." And she said, "What?" I said, "Your father left you a message in his book that shows you. I will show you. That says this is not a fatal accident." And she said, "What?" Because she knew that book backward and forward.
Right.
And I showed her the case of a woman who had a broken femur because the break had occurred underneath a tumor that kept recurring that had weakened the bone underneath it. And so her femur had broken in the middle, and it wouldn't heal as long as she kept having these operations for cancer over it. So they put in a plate, a metal plate, and screwed her bone to it with 3-inch surgical stainless steel screws,
Ouch.
about 10 of them. And there was an X-ray in my grandfather's book of how the woman, how the X-rays looked when she first came to him. And after 5 or 6 operations, and it kept coming back, she said, "Okay, enough of this nonsense. This is bull." And she went to my grandfather. And in treating her for the cancer, of course, when the cancer goes away, then everything else heals as well. So the bones started to thicken up. The bones started to heal where the tumor had been, and so the X-rays continued from there. After about 6 months or a year, you could see that the bone was healing, but it was healing in a way that the plate that they put in to help her walk um, was straight, and the bone, as you know, the femur is slightly curved.
Yeah.
And the femur said, "No, I don't want to be straight like this," and it started to bend the screws, and eventually it started to break the screws.
Wow.
And when they eventually took the plate out, which they did eventually, 3 of the screws could not be removed because they were broken.
Wow.
So I said, "Look, Mom, if the bone is strong enough to break surgical stainless steel screws, 3-inch surgical stainless steel screws, then it's certainly strong enough. That healing mechanism is strong enough to move the shattered part of your pelvis into the proper place and heal there." And she looked at the x-rays, studied them for a while, and she said, "Right, okay, let's get going." And so we made sure that she had plenty of lymphatic movement, and she got regular massage, and she got the Gerson Therapy. And 2 months later, after this quote fatal unquote accident, right? I called her up, and I was chit-chatting with her, and she said, "Oh, wait a minute. Where are my crutches?" I said, "Well, what do you mean?" She said, "Well, usually when I come into the room, I put my crutches over in the corner, and I come to sit on the bed, and get on the phone, and they're not there." She had forgotten.
Well, good.
So 2 months later, 2 months after her injury, 2.5 months after her injury, she was making rounds at the clinic again.
Right.
It wasn't until after her second break, when she fell and broke her femur, that she had trouble because she had surgery to put screws and pins into her hip, and then they put her into a rehab center. And I swear, a rehab center is the rehab center that they put her in, as nice and as well maintained and decorated and everything it was an extermination center. Because the people in there, they were basically just, they were ripe for extermination. They gave her pharmaceuticals.
Oh, yep.
And despite our urgent, repeated, and adamant requests not to, because this woman had never had pharmaceuticals, they gave her pharmaceuticals as soon as we left the room.
Of course.
By the time we rescued her out of there, she didn't recognize me anymore. So that, I think, was the proximate cause of her death.
Right.
Not the fact that she was just so old that she expired, was because they killed her with the drugs.
Yeah. And centers like that are good for doing that. Again, like I said, my experiences with the VA, they really love to push the drugs.
Of course.
So,
and you may be the lucky one, because one of the people I hired up in Red Bluff, California, he had been an Iraq War veteran in the Army, and he had had enough injuries that the VA gave him pharmaceuticals, right?
mm-hmm.
And then they sent him home, and every month and a half, 2 months, they would send him a pound of pills.
Right.
In the mail. And talk about opioid addiction. Oh my God. They would just send him unlabeled pills, a pound of them.
Until they decide that they don't want to give them to him anymore. By that time, he's a full-blown addict.
Yep.
I mean, they started me small. I would say small. They started me on Vicodin. moved me up to morphine when the Vicodin stopped working. And that morphine just really wrecked me. I mean, really bad. So then I went back to the VA. I said, look, you got to give me something besides these kind of pills, because they're not, number one, they're not doing anything for the pain anymore. And look at what it's doing to me. I'm pale. I'm falling down, So what they do, they gave me hydrocodone.
Oh, great.
Which is what they use to take heroin addicts down. So I called up a friend of mine, and she's a drug counselor. No, she's a sponsor. And I asked her, okay, tell me about these, because I know what they are, but I don't know what the effect is going to be. And she told me, take the least amount you can. And I took one little 10 milligram pill, and it laid me out for an entire weekend.
Yeah.
And after that, I was like, that's it. I'm done. I can't deal with this anymore.
Imagine a pound of that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Every other month or so.
Yep.
Wow.
So yeah, it's an extermination plan. It's not they're not interested in your recovering from anything.
No.
They want the veterans gone. They want them gone. Once they've used them for their combat operations to kill people, once they've used them, if they're injured or disabled in some way, they want them gone.
Well, look at what they did with the guys coming back, not just Vietnam, but pretty much for the whole 20th century and going into this one. Every time they come back with these injuries that they can't really explain, Gulf War syndrome, well, that's not a real thing, so we're not treating you for it. And it turned out that it was, because it was a lot of the DU that they were spreading around, which deteriorated the soldiers. PTSD, they barely even acknowledge. I've talked with vets.
And the nerve gas that the Iraqis were using.
And they said that's
the nerve
nothing.
gas and the nerve gas that we were using.
Yeah. So
and the antidote for that, and then they were leaving pallets full of Diet Pepsi out in the hot Arabian sun for days and days, and the aspartame would dissociate into formaldehyde.
Right.
So yeah, they were poisoning the soldiers big time.
Well, yeah, there was a documentary that I saw about Halliburton.
Yeah.
And what they were doing over in the Middle East when the whole thing first started going, and they got that big giant contract thanks to Dick Cheney. They were putting together water purification stations that didn't clean the water.
Yeah.
So, but they were getting a lot of money for it, and they were sending that water over to the soldiers and the Marines and the airmen, and saying, here, this is clean water to drink because it went through our purification system. And one of the guys said he could see stuff moving around in the water.
Oh, great.
So that's how well they take care of us.
So the question is, the Republicans constantly are telling you that they're the ones who were for the troops, right?
Yeah, I don't trust either party to tell you the truth.
They're not. All the politicians are just slime.
Well, and what's really infuriates me about that one is the politicians who were in the military.
Yeah, right.
And they still go along with whatever.
And there's few enough of them. They avoid it if they can.
Yeah. So I don't have a lot of respect for either party at this point, as far as any of that goes. When it comes to education, when it comes to health, when it comes to the vets, when it comes to just about everything.
Yep, exactly.
So
my thoughts exactly.
But anyway, we're getting to the point where we kind of need to wrap this up. So give us out your information, where they can find the book, where they can go to the Max Gerson Foundation, and any other bit of information you want to get out there.
Sure. The publishing operation that I have is called Gerson Health Media. And you can find a webpage with all the publications and DVDs and testimonials that we put up there at gersonmedia.com. GERSON media.com. The nonprofit Max Gerson Foundation can be found at maxgersonfoundation.org. And once again, there's lots of great information on there. There's documentaries, there's essays, there's publications, there's testimonials, all kinds of terrific information, most of it free. And we, of course, yes, we ask for donations because somebody has to support us, and it sure ain't going to be the pharmaceutical companies. So that's at maxgersonfoundation.org, and we invite you to look in there as well. A lot of great information there. There is a Chinese language Gerson page called Gerson.cn, China, right? Mm-hmm. And they handle the dissemination of information in China, and there are documentaries online you can watch for free on the Gerson Therapy on YouTube. There's The Beautiful Truth. There's Dying to Have Known. There's The Gerson Miracle. There's Heal Yourself, Heal the World. So those are 4 documentaries. All of them are on the list of the 10 best cancer documentaries of all time, put together by Food Matters. So there's all kinds of great information available. Then there are also Gerson Therapy support groups in about 8 languages. The American Gerson Therapy support group has 24,000 followers who have been through the therapy themselves, or who are curious about it, or who answer questions about it, or who have questions about it. 24,000. The Italian, there's 2 Italian ones because my sister lives in Italy, and each one of them has about 10,000 followers. There's 2 Chinese ones. Each one of those has about 10,000 followers. And there's others in German, French, Swedish, Spanish. They're all over the world. So you can find those on Facebook, Gerson Therapy. Just type in Gerson Therapy or Gerson, and you'll have a whole list of things to choose from in various different languages.
You haven't been banned off of Facebook yet?
Not yet. Not yet. But, we deal with what happens when it happens.
Right.
Let's see. So all of those are all places you can get literature. You can also get Healing the Gerson Way, which is my mother's main book. You can get that on Amazon in several different languages. You can get it on gersonmedia.com. And there are all kinds of things that you can get on gersonmedia.com. The ceremony, the memorial ceremony that you attended in Walnut, California, was filmed. Mm-hmm. There was a very, very fine cinematographer, and if you're going to find a very fine cinematographer, Los Angeles is the place to do it. Yeah. And he put together a 3-part video, each part about an hour and a half. And those are all on YouTube for free. You can find them through the support groups. You can find them through maxgersonfoundation.org, or you can just go right to YouTube and look for Gerson, and it'll pop up. Okay, great. There's also an audio book of my mother's Healing the Gerson Way, and that's on audible.com.